Mr. Rasmussen here. This is lesson 14B, and in this lesson we are going to take an in-depth look at the anatomy of a muscle cell. That's exciting. For this lesson, what I would do if I were you, if I was studying this lesson, I would go and get my muscle packet that I gave you in the beginning of the unit. I would go get that, and then I would open up to the back of the muscle packet where you have those labeled diagrams, because that's what we're going to be talking through today. So if you want to pause me now and then go get that, that would be great. Pause. Okay, now that you've resumed me, you should have your packet in front of you and you should be ready to go with this. The first picture we're going to look at is this one right here. This picture right here. So flip to this page, pause me, and then resume me again. So if we see here, what we're looking at is we're looking at a muscle body. So here's the body of this big muscle, and it's connected to this bone here. It's laying over this bone, and it's actually connected to the bone right here by this tissue. That tissue that connects muscle to bone, we've learned that already, that's a tendon. So tendons are going to connect muscle to bone. Now, if we take a look at this muscle cell, we can see that this muscle cell is a makeup of these bundles of stuff here. So inside this cross-section here, we can see that there's actually bundles of smaller things in here. And one of those bundles is pulled out here. Okay, so just to familiarize yourself with what's going on. Out here, the muscle is actually wrapped in a tissue. Wrapped in like an elastic tissue that allows it to move and stretch and stuff like that. That elastic tissue is called the epimysium. The epimysium. So that elastic tissue on the outside. Then I talked a little bit about these bundles here. These are called fascicles. A fascicle is a bundle of muscle fibers. So it's not one muscle fiber, but there's actually a whole bunch of muscle fibers in there. And we'll see that in the next page. But a bundle of muscle fibers is called a fascicle. Well, these fascicles are surrounded by another elastic tissue, and that's called the perimysium. So epimysium is on the outside of a muscle. The perimysium is on the outside of each individual fascicle. Okay, everybody got that? Let's move on. The next picture you should look at is this one. What we're looking at here, I'm going to go back for just a second. What we're looking at here is actually this part blown up. We're going to take a look at one fascicle, and we're going to enlarge just one fascicle. So this whole thing is a fascicle. So that whole thing right there is a fascicle. And we said that the fascicles are surrounded by this tissue. You can see that here. The tissue on the outside of a fascicle is called a perimysium. Okay? But inside of the fascicle, there is also tissue. There is also some connective tissue on the inside, and that's called the endomysium. So we have epimysium on the outside of a muscle, perimysium wrapping around a fascicle, and the endomysium sort of on the inside of this whole fascicle surrounding the muscle fibers. Well, I mentioned that fascicles are connections of muscle fibers. So each of these little things inside of a fascicle, so now we're just looking at a fascicle, each of the things inside of the fascicle are individual muscle fibers. And these muscle fibers are essentially muscle cells, and they each have nucleuses, or nuclei, and they are multinucleated. So these muscle cells are going to have many nucleuses. So that's a fascicle. So now what we're going to zoom in on, so before we zoomed in on the fascicle, the next picture is going to zoom in on this part here. We're going to look at just the muscle fiber anatomy. Okay? So this is that muscle fiber. And I labeled that here. So this part is the muscle fiber. And we mentioned that these muscle fibers have nuclei or nucleuses. So this one, here's our nucleus. Okay? Moving on. The muscle fiber is surrounded in a tissue. So out here, this tissue that the muscle fiber is surrounding, or the tissue, excuse me, that surrounds the muscle fiber, it's called the sarcolemma. Sarcolemma. And the fluid inside of a muscle, like cytoplasm, but we give it its own name. It's actually called sarcoplasm. So this fluid that fills up the muscle cell we call sarcoplasm. Okay? And inside these sarcoplasms, they also have mitochondria. We actually have a lot of mitochondria because muscle cells need lots of energy to do the contracting to move their sarcomeres, and we'll talk about a sarcomere later. So this muscle fiber. Now, the weird part if we look at is this stuff in here. Now, I'm just going to point out some things before I label it. You notice how there is this kind of tube that runs down the center here. And then there's these two tubes off to the side of it. And then there's all these little tubes that sort of connect them. Okay? The center tube is called a transverse tubule. Transverse tubule. The little things off to the side of them are called cisternae. So here, this is a transverse tubule, and off to the side of them are cisternae. Those three tubes together we call a triad. So the three tubes together we call a triad. And then right here, these little snake-like things that project off of it, they are called sarcoplasmic reticulum. Sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay? Now, we notice that the muscle is just a collection of fascicles, and the fascicles is a collection of these muscle fibers. Well, a muscle fiber is a whole bunch of these smaller fibers called a myofibril. Myofibril. So, muscles sort of remind me of those Russian nesting dolls, if you know what I'm talking about. You have the doll, I wish I had one in front of me. You have the doll, and when you take it off, there's a littler doll inside, and when you open up the littler doll, there's an even smaller doll inside. That's what a muscle cell's like. A muscle is a collection of fascicles. A fascicle is a whole bunch of muscle fibers bundled together, and a muscle fiber is a whole bunch of myofibrils wrapped together. So, that's sort of the anatomy. I might pause this and watch it again just to understand all of them. Even though you have them written down, you still need to know them and understand them. So make sure maybe to watch it again and then bring any questions you have with me to class. All right, thanks a lot, team. If you have any questions, once again, ask me anytime. I'll talk to you later.